Have you ever wondered what actually happens when raw human anatomy meets the ruthless physics of world-class choreography? When we watch BTS dominating global stadium stages, we see explosive power and pinpoint synchronization, but dance biomechanics reveals that true stage dominance hides in an invisible superpower: extreme flexibility, joint elasticity, and core fluid motion. Which member defies the laws of anatomical motion to pull off seemingly impossible angles, and whose body bends like pure liquid silk under the spotlight? Get ready to look beneath the surface of the spectacle, because ranking all 7 global icons by their sheer physical range, joint mobility, and dance flexibility is about to shatter everything you thought you knew. Number 7. RM, the towering architect, conquering the long limb dilemma. When we talk about the raw physics of dance, height is often celebrated for stage presence, but in the merciless science of human biomechanics, having a towering 181-centimeter frame is actually one of the greatest natural obstacles to explosive flexibility. Kim Namjoon stands as the undisputed physical anchor of BTS, boasting broad shoulders, long femurs, and an extended torso that inherently places his center of gravity significantly higher than that of his groupmates. In kinetic terms, longer limbs create massive resistance levers, meaning that executing sudden spinal rolls, deep floor sweeps, and rapid hip isolations requires almost twice the muscular torque and joint elasticity compared to someone with a more compact build. When Namjoon entered Big Hit Entertainment, he was purely a lyricist and underground rapper, a creative mind whose body had never undergone the rigorous anatomical reshaping of classical ballet, modern jazz, or acrobatic b-boying. Early rehearsal footage from their rookie era revealed a body wrestling against its own natural skeletal stiffness, where tight hamstring tendons and restricted thoracic spine mobility made seamless, fluid transitions a daunting daily battle. Yet, what makes RM's ranking at number 7 an inspiring masterclass in sheer dedication is how he systematically restructured his own physical limitations through relentless neuromuscular conditioning. If you watch the evolution of his movement from the rigid, hard-hitting stomping of No More Dream to the liquid, wave-driven choreography of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, you witness a dramatic expansion of his kinetic range. In Blood, Sweat, and Tears, the choreography demands extreme pelvic tilting, subtle lumbar extensions, and fluid scapular retraction, movements that inherently punish stiff dancers. Namjoon did not merely memorize the steps, he worked tirelessly behind closed doors with physical trainers and choreographers, incorporating rigorous functional stretching, deep myofascial release, and Pilates-inspired core stabilization to decompress his spine and lengthen his muscle bellies. By the time BTS unleashed the monumental contemporary masterpiece Black Swan, RM was executing intricate torso suspensions and wing-like shoulder articulations that required profound scapular mobility and deep dynamic hamstring flexibility, moving with an unprecedented atmospheric grace. Think about the explosive demands of On and Dionysus, where dancers are forced into rapid level changes, violent drops into low squats, and immediate kinetic rebounds. For a tall dancer, dropping into a deep squat without collapsing the chest requires immense ankle dorsiflexion and hip adductor flexibility. RM meets these physical demands head-on, anchoring high-energy formations with a grounded yet surprisingly elastic posture that keeps BTS visually massive on stadium stages worldwide. The beauty of Namjoon's flexibility journey lies not in effortless, innate hypermobility, but in the conscious, hard-earned elasticity of an artist who refused to let his anatomical predisposition define his artistic boundaries. When you observe him moving effortlessly through the smooth retro-funk grooves of Butter and Dynamite, executing crisp shoulder rolls, relaxed knee isolations, and rhythmic pelvic sways, you are looking at a performer who conquered the natural tension of his own frame. His flexibility is a testament to discipline, proving that with calculated biomechanical conditioning, even the most rigid skeletal architecture can be unlocked into a powerful instrument of pure expressive performance art. Number 6. Jin, the silver voice, breaking the chains of muscular rigidity. When we delve into the rigorous biomechanical demands of elite K-pop choreography, we often overlook the immense physiological disadvantage of possessing a naturally statuesque, heavily structured frame. Kim Sak-jin, famously known worldwide as Worldwide Handsome, entered the grueling idol training system not with dreams of complex syncopation or acrobatic floor work, but with the aspirations of an actor, armed with a degree in art and acting and a skeletal structure built for still frame perfection rather than explosive kinetic fluidity. In the ruthless hierarchy of dance physics, Jin's iconic, incredibly broad shoulders, often celebrated as a pinnacle of classic male aesthetics, actually act as a massive biomechanical hindrance when it comes to the fluid articulation of the thoracic spine and the required elasticity of the scapular region. For a dancer to execute the liquid, wave-like body rolls that are a staple in contemporary hip-hop and urban choreography, the clavicle, sternum, and scapulae must possess an extraordinary degree of independent mobility, allowing the rib cage to glide seamlessly over the pelvis. For a naturally rigid, broad-chested individual like Jin, achieving this level of upper body flexibility requires forcefully overriding the body's natural muscular tension and essentially reprogramming the central nervous system to allow for deep, unfamiliar joint isolations. In the infancy of BTS's career, during the aggressive, hard-hitting eras of No More Dream and We Are Bulletproof Part 2, Jin's lack of innate joint elasticity was a glaring vulnerability, forcing his body into a state of constant, painful catch-up against members who had been dancing since childhood. The narrative of Jin simply being the visual or a subpar dancer is a tragic oversimplification of a man who waged a silent, grueling war against his own muscular architecture. Behind the closed doors of their notoriously suffocating basement practice rooms, while the natural dancers of the group rested, Jin was meticulously breaking down his body's resistance, spending countless hours holding agonizing static stretches, tearing microfibers in his tight hamstrings, and forcing his stiff hip flexors to yield to the brutal demands of big hits choreographers. Psychological stress inherently manifests as muscular tension, and for Jin, the crushing anxiety of potentially dragging down his phenomenally talented younger brothers only added an invisible layer of stiffness to his already rigid joints. Yet he pushed through this psychological and physical concrete. To truly understand the magnitude of his flexibility evolution, we must fast forward to the emotionally devastating, contemporary-infused choreography of Spring Day. This masterpiece required a complete departure from rigid, aggressive stomping, demanding instead sweeping, continuous motions, deep pliés that test ankle dorsiflexion to its absolute limit, and sorrowful, reaching extensions that pull directly from the latissimus dorsi and the lower lumbar spine. Jin executed these movements not with the jagged hesitation of a stiff amateur, but with a cultivated, breathtaking elegance that proved his relentless stretching regimens, yoga-like breathing techniques, and core stabilization routines were finally paying life-changing dividends. The true crucible of Jin's physical transformation, however, arrived with the explosive, gothic intensity of Fake Love and the mythic high-octane theatricality of Dionysus. In Fake Love, the choreography mimics the jerky, unnatural snapping of a broken marionette, requiring the dancers to abruptly lock and unlock their joints, snapping their necks and isolating their rib cages in ways that demand both extreme muscle control and hyper-responsive tendon elasticity. Jin's ability to execute these jarring kinetic stops without tearing a shoulder labrum or straining a cervical ligament speaks volumes about the dynamic flexibility and muscular fortification he had hammered into his frame. Then came Dionysus, a grueling, lung-burning marathon of rapid level changes, where the members are repeatedly dropping to the floor, executing deep, knee-shattering squats, and rebounding back to a standing position in fractions of a second. The sheer hip mobility, gluteal strength, and knee joint resilience required to drop into these explosive low stances without compromising spinal alignment or collapsing forward is staggering. Jin held the line with a ferocious, unyielding intensity that permanently silenced any remaining critics of his physical prowess and kinetic range. Let us not forget the breathtaking vulnerability of Black Swan, a piece heavily reliant on barefoot contemporary dance, where heavy boots cannot mask stiff ankles and baggy clothes cannot hide rigid torsos. Barefoot dancing demands unparalleled plantar flexibility and toe articulation to grip the floor, alongside sweeping bird-like arm movements that require the shoulder joints to open to their absolute maximum circumference. Jin moved through this atmospheric masterpiece with a haunting grace, his spine undulating and his arms extending with a lyrical fluidity that would have been biologically impossible for him just 5 years prior. What makes Suck Jin's ranking at number 6 so profoundly inspiring, so intensely emotional, is the realization that every single degree of flexibility, every smooth transition, every effortless-looking body roll, and every deep lunge was bought with blood, sweat, silent tears, and unspeakable physical frustration in the dead of night. He is the living, breathing embodiment of the triumph of human willpower over anatomical destiny. When you see him gliding through the buttery smooth, rhythmically intricate footwork of butter, or leading the joyful, expansive movements of permission to dance with completely relaxed shoulders, a loose neck, and fluid, bouncing knees, you are not looking at a natural-born dancer who was gifted a rubbery physique by genetics. You are bearing witness to a meticulously sculpted work of art, a visionary artist who refused to be caged by his own bones and muscles. He stretched his physical and mental limitations until they snapped, systematically molding himself into a performer who doesn't just keep up with the most synchronized, technically demanding group in the world, but actively enhances their global visual harmony with a refined, hard-earned, and deeply powerful grace. His astonishing journey from a stiff, awkward acting student to a global stadium conqueror who can bend, snap, flow, and articulate his body with the absolute best of them is a monumental testament to the fact that flexibility is not just a passive physical trait, but a fierce state of mind, an unyielding, burning refusal to accept the boundaries of your own body. As we move deeper into this top-list ranking, the natural elasticity begins to dramatically increase. The joints become looser, and the physics of human movement are about to get even more mind-bending and surreal, leaving us on the edge of our seats wondering if sheer brute willpower and endless stretching got Kim Suk Jin this far, what kind of supernatural joint mobility, liquid spine articulation, and gravity-defying flexibility awaits us as we enter the elite top 5 of BTS. Number 5. Suga, the Shadow Dancer, overcoming the shattered joint, delivering lethal precision. When evaluating the raw, mechanical flexibility of Min Yoongi, globally celebrated as Suga or August D, we must fundamentally alter our understanding of what it means to be a flexible dancer, moving away from simple aesthetic lines and plunging directly into the brutal, inspiring world of anatomical compensation, chronic trauma, and astonishing biomechanical resilience. To the untrained eye of a casual viewer, Yoongi's dance style often registers as effortlessly cool, steeped in a laid-back, heavy hip-hop swagger that seems almost nonchalant compared to the hyper-aggressive energy of his bandmates. However, true dance scientists and choreographers know that to execute movements with that level of relaxed fluidity, to make intense, high BPM choreography look completely effortless, requires a deeply rooted, highly developed joint elasticity, particularly in the lower lumbar spine, pelvis, and ankle complexes. But what catapults Yoongi into the elite fifth position on our definitive flexibility ranking is not just his natural kinetic rhythm, but the emotionally devastating and awe-inspiring reality that he maintained this world-class mobility while secretly fighting a devastating progressive structural failure in his own skeleton. The tragic origin story of his biomechanical limitations is etched into the very lore of BTS. A pre-debut motorcycle accident while working a part-time delivery job violently tore the labrum in his left shoulder, dislocating the joint and permanently altering his anatomical trajectory. In the ruthless physics of professional dance, the shoulder complex, comprising the clavicle, scapula, and humerus, is the literal anchor for upper body expression, essential for everything from expansive arm swings and sharp chest isolations to basic balance during rapid pirouettes. A torn labrum fundamentally destroys the joint stability, creating agonizing friction, severely restricting the range of motion, and triggering the body's central nervous system to forcefully lock down the surrounding musculature in a desperate attempt to protect the damaged capsule. For almost a decade, Yoongi danced on global stadium stages with a structurally compromised upper quadrant, a feat that biomechanically should have rendered him rigid, defensive, and physically incapable of executing big hits notoriously punishing choreography. Yet he adapted with the cunning brilliance of a survivalist. To compensate for the agonizing restriction and lack of extension in his left shoulder, Yoongi intuitively hyper-developed the flexibility and kinetic responsiveness of his lower body and core. Watch his mesmerizing, intricate footwork in the explosive climax of Mic Drop or the razor-sharp, syncopated transitions in DNA. You will notice that Yoongi generates his visual power not from sprawling upper body movements, but from a profound elastic looseness in his hips, knees, and ankles. His center of gravity is naturally lower than members like RM or Jin, providing him with a compact, highly stable anatomical base that allows him to execute rapid direction changes and deep, grounding squats with minimal strain on his upper torso. He mastered the biomechanical art of the groove, a dance technique that relies heavily on the continuous fluid bouncing of the knees and the seamless tilting of the pelvis, requiring immense flexibility in the hip flexors and Achilles tendons. By keeping his lower kinetic chain incredibly loose and responsive, he created a mesmerizing illusion of full-body fluidity that masterfully masked the tragic stiffness radiating from his shattered shoulder. The sheer physical intelligence required to consciously reroute kinetic energy away from a painful joint and distribute it through the spine and legs while maintaining perfect synchronization with 6 other world-class performers is nothing short of miraculous. But the emotional zenith of his physical journey arrived in late 2020 when the pain became a terrifying paralysis, forcing him to finally undergo a complex surgical reconstruction of his torn labrum. The ensuing rehabilitation was a grueling, agonizing war against scar tissue, muscular atrophy, and deeply ingrained neuromuscular compensations. For months, his arm was locked in a brace, his mobility reduced to zero, facing the terrifying psychological abyss of wondering if he would ever reclaim his physical flow. When he finally returned to the stage, the transformation was a revelation that brought tears to the eyes of millions. The post-surgery Yoongi emerged with a liberated upper body, finally able to execute the sweeping, atmospheric arm extensions required in the contemporary masterpiece Black Swan, without the subtle, defensive wince of chronic pain. We finally saw the true, unhindered extent of his physical range. His performance in the buttery smooth choreography of Dynamite and Butter showcased a newly unlocked thoracic spine and a relaxed, joyful elasticity in his shoulders that completely revolutionized his stage presence. He was no longer a shadow dancer fighting his own skeleton. He was a fully integrated kinetic force. Furthermore, if we look back at the devastatingly aggressive era of On and Fire, we see Yoongi throwing his entire body into rapid floor drops and aggressive stomps, movements that demand explosive fast-twitch muscle responses and profound joint resilience. His ability to hit absolute rigid angles, locking his joints on specific musical downbeats with lethal precision, and instantly melt back into a relaxed, liquid groove, requires a sophisticated elasticity in his muscle fibers that cannot be purely taught. It must be felt in the soul. Yoongi's placement at number 5 is a massive tribute to his unique, hard-hitting yet incredibly fluid style, proving that true dance flexibility is not merely about how high you can kick or how far you can bend your spine backward. It is about the profound, intelligent mastery of your own physiological instrument. It is about the breathtaking courage to endure, to adapt, to meticulously stretch and strengthen the healthy parts of your body to carry the burden of the broken parts. Min Yoongi took a shattered joint that would have ended the careers of lesser men and built a legacy of untouchable swagger and hypnotic, groovy elasticity around it. He is the ultimate testament to the fact that sometimes the most magnificent, awe-inspiring flexibility is born not from anatomical perfection, but from the relentless, unbroken spirit of a survivor who simply refuses to stop moving, turning pain into absolute liquid mastery on the world's biggest stages.
Number 4. V, the soulful shapeshifter, bending reality with liquid velvet. When we pivot from the realm of sheer mechanical survival and hard-earned anatomical conditioning into the territory of innate stylistic fluidity, we encounter a performer whose biomechanical signature defies conventional K-pop parameters, forcing us to redefine flexibility not as a measure of extreme physical angles, but as the liquid manipulation of time and space itself. Kim Tae-young, universally celebrated as V, is arguably the most fascinating anatomical anomaly in BTS, possessing a skeletal structure and neuromuscular rhythm that utterly hypnotizes audiences, earning him an undisputed placement at number 4 on our elite ranking. To understand the profound physics of Tae-young's movement, we must first analyze his unique physical architecture. Much like RM and Jin, V is blessed with a naturally large frame, characterized by broad shoulders, long limbs, and a commanding presence that inherently requires immense kinetic torque to manipulate rapidly. However, unlike the early struggles of his taller bandmates, Tae-young's joints possess an eerie, almost supernatural baseline of elasticity, combined with an unparalleled intuitive understanding of kinetic energy distribution. He doesn't just execute choreography, he metabolizes the music, allowing the rhythm to physically melt his joints into a state of what biomechanists call eccentric muscular control, the ability to smoothly elongate a muscle while it is still under heavy tension. This is the deeply scientific secret behind his signature soulful groove. If you strip away the dazzling stage lights and analyze his raw rehearsal footage, you will immediately notice that his movement is deeply rooted in his cervical spine and thoracic region. V possesses an astonishing degree of neck flexibility and head isolation that allows him to physically punctuate musical downbeats with razor-sharp micro-movements, drawing the viewer's eye exactly where he wants it. This level of isolated cervical control requires incredibly supple trapezius and sternocleidomastoid muscles, allowing his head to seemingly float independently of his torso. But the true breathtaking masterpiece of Taehyung's flexibility and bodily control is forever immortalized in his legendary solo performance of Singularity. This neo-soul R&B track demanded a choreographic approach that abandoned explosive stadium-shaking power in favor of agonizingly slow, deliberate, and fiercely controlled sensual fluidity. The opening sequence, where he intimately dances with a coat rack, requires a mind-bending level of wrist, elbow, and shoulder isolation to create the uncanny illusion of a phantom partner. To execute these buttery smooth arm waves and intricate hand gestures without breaking the mesmerizing spell requires hypermobile carpal joints and deeply relaxed rotator cuffs. As Singularity progresses, the choreography demands deep, agonizingly slow knee drops and fluid pelvic rotations that brutally test the eccentric strength and flexibility of the quadriceps and hip flexors. While other dancers might snap rigidly into these low positions, V melts into them, his spine undulating with a velvety grace that makes gravity itself look like a mere suggestion. His lower lumbar flexibility allows him to achieve extreme, dramatic backward leans, while his unparalleled facial tension control, often overlooked as a crucial element of full-body expression, mirrors the exact tension in his muscles, creating a flawless, hypnotic synthesis of emotion and anatomy. We must also examine the iconic heart-stopping opening sequence of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, where V sits blindfolded before slowly, languidly extending his neck and spine. The sheer thoracic extension and relaxed scapular mobility required to make this simple seated motion look dangerously seductive is a masterclass in postural flexibility. When you watch the viral fan cams of his performances in Pied Piper or Dimple, you are witnessing a masterclass in subtle, rolling body waves that begin at the very base of the spine and ripple flawlessly up through the crown of the head. This seamless spinal articulation is impossible without incredibly loose intervertebral discs and a highly elastic erector spinae muscle group. In the ferocious, aggressive choreography of On and Mic Drop, where the physical demands are punishingly fast and brutally hard-hitting, Taehyung brilliantly utilizes his joint elasticity as a shock absorber. Instead of locking his knees and elbows during explosive stops, he allows a micro-bend, a subtle elastic give in his joints that absorbs the kinetic impact, allowing him to seamlessly rebound into the next formation without breaking his signature laid-back swagger. This highly sophisticated kinetic dampening is a hallmark of elite, intuitive dancers who understand how to protect their bodies from chronic trauma while maximizing visual impact. Furthermore, his ability to execute the iconic syncopated footwork of DNA, an era that officially cemented his status as a member of the official dance line, showcases his extraordinary ankle dorsiflexion and Achilles tendon elasticity, allowing him to glide across the stage with a lightweight, almost feline agility that completely contradicts his broad, imposing stature. Taehyung's flexibility is deeply psychological. It is the physical manifestation of his deep baritone voice, rich, unpredictable, soulful, and completely unhurried. He does not force his body into rigid geometric boxes. He allows his limbs to breathe, his spine to curve organically, and his joints to flow like liquid velvet over the harsh, rigid beats of hip-hop and pop tracks. What makes his number 4 ranking so deeply compelling is the realization that his flexibility is inextricably linked to his genius-level musicality. He uses his supreme joint mobility not to execute circus-like acrobatic tricks, but to stretch a single beat of music to its absolute agonizing limit, hanging in the air just a microsecond longer than anyone else before snapping back into perfect synchronization.
When you watch Kim Tae-young dance, you are not merely observing a pop star hitting his marks, you are witnessing a biomechanical storyteller, an artist who has unlocked the profound elastic potential of his own skeleton to bend reality, command the atmosphere, and leave millions of viewers utterly entranced by the sheer soulful physics of his liquid movement. The line between acting and dancing completely disintegrates when V is on stage, proving that true flexibility is not just in the muscles, but in the boundless artistic soul that drives them. As we now prepare to breach the terrifyingly elite top 3, the anatomical boundaries are about to shatter completely, leading us into a realm where bones seem to disappear, gravity is entirely defied, and the human body is pushed to the absolute terrifying limits of physical capability. Who holds the bronze medal of extreme joint mobility?
Number 3. Jungkook, the golden kinetic machine, fusing brutal power with elastic mastery. Entering the hallowed territory of the top 3 brings us to the ultimate biomechanical marvel of modern performance art, a phenomenon where sheer athletic power and hyper-elastic joint mobility collide to create a terrifyingly flawless stage presence. Jungkook, the undisputed golden maknae of BTS, holds the 3rd position on our ranking not merely because he is one of the most explosive dancers in global pop history, but because he completely shatters the fundamental biological paradox of dance anatomy. The trade-off between massive muscular hypertrophy and extreme tendon flexibility. In standard human biomechanics, building dense, heavy, fast-twitch muscle mass inherently creates stiffness, tightens the myofascial tissue, and dramatically restricts the range of motion around major joints such as the hips, shoulders, and spine. Bodybuilders and heavily muscled athletes notoriously struggle with fluidity and joint mobility. Yet, Jungkook's physiological architecture represents a freakish golden intersection of explosive powerlifting strength and breathtaking gymnastic elasticity. From the tender age of 15, Jungkook threw himself into the merciless furnace of professional training, traveling to Los Angeles to study urban dance, b-boying, and movement dynamics under legendary choreographers before BTS even debuted. That early immersive neuromuscular conditioning fundamentally wired his central nervous system to treat deep, high-stress stretches not as passive recovery, but as dynamic launching pads for kinetic violence. If you look at his skeletal and muscular profile, Jungkook possesses an exceptionally powerful posterior chain, thick, dense gluteal muscles, fortified hamstrings, and a steel-like core, paired with an astonishingly supple hip capsule and deeply mobile acetylbofemoral joints. This rare anatomical combination allows him to execute jaw-dropping, high-extension kicks that slice through the air with the aerodynamic velocity of a whip, reaching vertical angles well beyond 180 degrees without the slightest hint of compensatory spinal collapse. Watch the heart-stopping choreography of Blood, Sweat, and Tears or the legendary dance breaks in DNA and Idol. Notice the sheer depth of his floor lunges, where his pelvis drops inches from the stage floor while his upper torso remains perfectly upright, demonstrating elite-level flexibility in the psoas major and rectus femoris muscles. When Jungkook drops into a sudden deep split or a low sweeping floor spin, his joints do not merely tolerate the stress, they actively load like heavy-duty mechanical springs. This phenomenon, known in kinetic science as the stretch-shortening cycle, allows him to instantly convert the extreme elongation of his muscle fibers into a devastating upward explosion, propelling his entire body back into the air with zero visible momentum loss. Consider his legendary center stage execution in Fake Love. The choreography demands an agonizingly low drop to the knees, followed by an instantaneous full-body pop and violent torso arch, a sequence that places unfathomable sheer force on the patellar tendons and the lumbar spine.
Jungkook executes this with a fluid, terrifying precision, absorbing the ground impact through hyper-elastic ankle dorsiflexion and loose, shock-absorbing hips before snapping his chest forward with the force of a battering ram. The physical demands of On push this dynamic flexibility to its absolute apex. In the climactic bridge and dance break of On, Jungkook leads the formation through rapid, violent level changes, dropping from full-height leaping kicks into subterranean floor transitions within milliseconds. To sustain that level of punishing, bone-rattling intensity across a 2-hour stadium concert without tearing a hamstring, dislocating a sacroiliac joint, or compromising vocal stability while singing live high notes requires a degree of functional dynamic flexibility that is virtually unmatched in the entire global entertainment industry. His solo masterpiece, Euphoria, showcased a completely different lyrical dimension of his flexibility. Flying above roaring stadium crowds on a harness, suspended in mid-air with zero ground support, Jungkook maintained immaculate core stabilization and extended flowing limb lines, proving that his flexibility is not reliant on gravity or floor leverage, but is deeply anchored in his internal neuromuscular control. Furthermore, his viral solo single, Seven, and the breathtaking visual feast of Standing Next to You revealed an artist who has refined his raw physical power into a sophisticated retro-funk elasticity. In Standing Next to You, Jungkook executes razor-sharp Michael Jackson-inspired toe stands, deep pelvic thrusts, and rapid, isolated shoulder waves that require incredible mobility in the metatarsals, knees, and thoracic spine. A toe stand alone requires extreme plantar flexion and astonishing toe joint flexibility, supporting the dancer's entire body weight on the tips of the feet while keeping the ankles completely rigid and aligned. Jungkook executes these brutal maneuvers with an effortless, swaggering smirk, making the biomechanically impossible look like second nature. He does not simply possess loose joints, he owns complete authoritative cognitive control over every single degree of his joint rotation, moving seamlessly from rock-solid isometric locks into liquid, wave-like body rolls that ripple from his neck down to his ankles. This fusion of iron strength and rubber band elasticity is what makes his dance style look so devastatingly crisp, visually massive, and endlessly addictive to watch. He treats his body as an elite, high-performance athletic machine, constantly conditioning, stretching, boxing, and weightlifting to ensure that his range of motion never degrades under the grueling stress of global tours. He stands as a towering testament to what happens when raw, God-given genetic potential is met with an obsessive, relentless work ethic that refuses to accept the biological trade-off between power and flexibility. As we stand in awe of Jungkook's golden kinetic mastery at number 3, the atmosphere grows unbearably intense because above this athletic powerhouse sit only 2 legendary dance gods whose relationship with human anatomy defies the very laws of physics. Who takes the runner-up spot with their liquid, bone-breaking isolations, and who reigns supreme at number 1 with a level of flexibility so ethereal, emotional, and supernatural that it leaves the entire world utterly speechless?
Number 2. J-Hope, the street dance general, defying physics with liquid bone isolations. Entering the absolute highest echelons of our biomechanical ranking brings us face to face with the undisputed dance captain of BTS, a man whose physical capabilities are so shockingly unnatural that professional choreographers and medical experts alike are left scratching their heads in pure disbelief. Jung Ho-sok, universally revered as J-Hope, claims the breathtaking number 2 spot because his brand of flexibility completely redefines the anatomical limits of human joint isolation, creating a visual spectacle where bone, muscle, and cartilage seem to temporarily dissolve into pure liquid rhythm. To truly comprehend the terrifying magnitude of J-Hope's physical genius, we must trace his roots back to the gritty, highly competitive underground street dance battles of Gwangju, South Korea. Long before he was a global stadium conqueror, he was an underground legend in a fiercely respected dance crew called Neuron, mastering the punishing, hyper-complex street styles of popping, locking, waving, and the boogaloo. In the brutal science of dance physics, these styles do not merely require you to stretch your muscles, they demand an agonizing, relentless reprogramming of the central nervous system to forcefully isolate individual joints and muscle groups, moving them completely independently of the rest of the body. When a normal person moves their arm, the shoulder, elbow, and wrist naturally coordinate in a single kinetic chain. But when J-Hope executes a wave or a bone-breaking isolation, he possesses the uncanny, almost supernatural ability to completely disconnect his joints, rolling his scapula, popping his elbow, and hyperextending his wrists as if his limbs are entirely detached from his torso. This requires an insane degree of elasticity in the joint capsules and ligaments, paired with muscle tension control, the explosive ability to contract and relax a muscle fiber in a fraction of a millisecond. If you want a masterclass in this terrifying physiological control, look no further than his legendary solo masterpiece, Boy Meets Evil. This choreography remains one of the most physically punishing routines in K-pop history, heavily featuring elements of contemporary acrobatics fused with dark, aggressive street dance. The routine demands brutal, gravity-defying backbends that push the thoracic and lumbar spine into extreme hyperextension, forcing the abdominal wall to stretch to its absolute biological limit while still maintaining the core strength needed to snap back into an upright position instantly. During the iconic chorus, J-Hope executes a sprawling, mid-air split leap that transitions directly into aggressive low-to-the-ground footwork, demanding elite-level flexibility in the hip flexors, adductors, and deep pelvic rotators. He performs these biomechanical miracles with a chilling, effortless smirk, his body gliding across the stage like a frictionless phantom. What makes J-Hope's elasticity so uniquely mesmerizing is his mastery of the groove, a deeply ingrained rhythmic bounce that dictates every micro-movement of his body. Watch his intricate solo sections in Mic Drop or Chicken Noodle Soup. His knees and ankles act like hyper-responsive shock absorbers, possessing an extreme degree of dorsiflexion and synovial lubrication that allows him to drop his center of gravity dangerously close to the floor without ever compromising his balance or speed. Let's also analyze the viral, world-stopping phenomenon of his hip isolations in the legendary track Bepse, Silver Spoon. The sheer explosive rotational force he generates from his pelvis, combined with the extreme elasticity of his lower lumbar spine and deep abdominal obliques, creates a visual impact that has literally caused stadiums to erupt in deafening hysteria. To execute those rapid, aggressive pelvic thrusts without severely damaging the sacroiliac joint requires an incredibly loose, highly conditioned pelvic girdle, proving that his flexibility is deeply functional and utterly lethal. Furthermore, consider the explosive disco pop dance break in Dynamite, where J-Hope takes center stage and executes a jaw-dropping high-velocity kick combined with a deep back lean. This maneuver demands absolute perfection in the kinetic chain. His hamstring must stretch instantaneously to its absolute maximum, while his abdominal wall forcefully contracts to prevent his spine from snapping backward. He pulls it off with a radiant, blinding smile, making the biomechanically impossible look like a casual stroll in the park. In the fast-paced, razor-sharp formations of DNA and On, J-Hope often acts as the visual anchor, executing neck isolations and rapid head snaps that require an impossibly loose cervical spine and incredibly supple trapezius muscles.
He can hit a hard, rigid locking pose on a downbeat and within the very next millisecond melt his entire skeletal structure into a buttery, fluid wave that ripples down to his toes. This duality, the ability to switch instantly from concrete rigidity to liquid elasticity, is the holy grail of professional dance, and Jung Ho-sok possesses it in terrifying abundance. But his flexibility goes far beyond just urban styles. Let us not forget his breathtaking barefoot contemporary performance in the Black Swan music video, where his solo shadow dance sequence revealed a sweeping, elegant range of motion that rivaled classically trained ballet dancers. His sweeping arm extensions and deep lyrical floor work proved that his shoulder joints and latissimus dorsi possess an expansive, hypermobile range of motion, allowing him to paint emotional landscapes with his body. As the official dance leader of BTS, the emotional and physical burden J-Hope carries is astronomical. He is the standard bearer, the meticulous perfectionist who learns the choreography first, breaks it down, and drills the rest of the group until their angles match perfectly. This relentless dedication means his body has endured tens of thousands of hours of repetitive stress, yet instead of stiffening up or succumbing to chronic injury, his joints have seemingly evolved, becoming more pliable, more resilient, and more impossibly fluid with every passing year. His solo album, Jack in the Box, further showcased this raw, grunge-inspired physical looseness, particularly in tracks like More and Arson, where his movements mimic the chaotic, unpredictable flickering of a flame. The sheer neurological brilliance required to command every single muscle fiber, to force your body to move like a liquid mirage while simultaneously rapping and projecting blinding charisma to a stadium of 80,000 people, is a feat that secures his status as a once-in-a-generation kinetic genius. J-Hope doesn't just dance to the music, he physically embodies the sound waves, allowing the rhythm to stretch, distort, and manipulate his anatomy into shapes that defy standard human biomechanics. His number 2 ranking is an awe-inspiring tribute to a man who took the raw, unpolished energy of the streets and refined it into a globally untouchable standard of joint mobility and isolated muscular control. Yet, as our heart rates spike and we stare into the absolute zenith of this biomechanical hierarchy, one singular question remains suspended in the air. If the liquid bone isolations, gravity-defying leaps, and supernatural street dance flexibility of the dance captain himself are only enough to secure the second place, what kind of ethereal, otherworldly, and emotionally shattering physical hypermobility sits at the very top of the throne? Who is the member whose body moves less like flesh and bone and more like the very wind itself, possessing a flexibility so extreme, so beautifully tragic and utterly flawless that it is about to leave you completely and utterly speechless?
Number 1. Jimin, the celestial swan, bending the laws of physics with ethereal hypermobility. When we finally reach the absolute pinnacle of our biomechanical countdown, we are no longer just talking about elite idol training, rigorous stretching routines, or even world-class hip-hop isolations. We are stepping into the realm of the supernatural, analyzing a human body that seemingly defies the very biological constraints of bone, cartilage, and gravity itself, belonging to none other than Park Jimin. To understand why Jimin holds the undisputed, uncontested #1 spot as the most flexible and fluid member of BTS, we must travel back to the hallowed halls of the Busan High School of Arts, where he entered as a prodigy and historically became the top student in the modern dance department. Unlike the rest of his group mates, who were heavily molded by the hard-hitting, aggressive physics of underground b-boying or urban street dance, Jimin's foundational kinetic architecture was painstakingly carved by the merciless, exacting disciplines of classical ballet and contemporary dance. This foundational difference is absolutely crucial to his anatomical development. Contemporary dance does not just demand that you hit a specific visual angle, it demands extreme hypermobile joint articulation, requiring the dancer to lengthen their muscle fibers to the absolute tearing point while maintaining breathtaking, effortless grace. Jimin is blessed and in many ways heavily burdened with a physiological condition known in kinesthetics as hypermobility, meaning his ligaments and tendons possess an unusually high degree of natural elasticity, allowing his joints to bend, rotate, and extend far beyond the normal human range of motion. But raw hypermobility alone is dangerous, unstable, and uncontrollable. What makes Jimin a once-in-a-generation kinetic genius is the staggering, ironclad core strength he has meticulously built to control and anchor this extreme elasticity, turning a potential physical vulnerability into an otherworldly stage superpower. When you watch Jimin move, you are witnessing the absolute dissolution of the human skeleton. Let us deeply dissect the haunting, emotionally devastating masterpiece that is his solo track, Lie. The choreography is a grueling, terrifying test of spinal flexibility and neck isolation, requiring Jimin to execute deep, agonizing backbends where his head practically touches the floor, only to snap back into perfect upright alignment in a fraction of a second. This demands an erector spinae and a lumbar spine so supple that it behaves more like a coiled steel spring than a column of rigid bones. In the legendary gravity-defying climax of Lie, he is lifted into the air, suspended by his bandmates, and his body goes completely limp, his spine arching backward in an extreme suspended crescent shape that leaves biomechanic experts utterly speechless. But the true, terrifying magic of Jimin's flexibility lies in his microscopic transitions. In the brutal world of dance physics, the hardest part is not getting into a split or a deep lunge, it is the seamless, invisible transition out of it. Watch the breathtaking floor work in his solo Serendipity, where the stage becomes his liquid canvas. Jimin executes full 360-degree rolls over his own shoulders and cervical spine, his body melting into the floor without a single jagged edge or rigid impact. His shoulder joints possess an extraordinary rotational circumference, allowing his arms to flow like ribbons of water around his torso. His absolute mastery of eccentric muscle contraction, the ability to slowly and agonizingly control a muscle while it is fully stretched, creates the hypnotic illusion that he is dancing underwater, manipulating the very air pressure around him. We cannot discuss his extreme flexibility without analyzing the mythic, culturally transcendent moment at the 2019 Melon Music Awards during his solo modern dance to I Need You. Under the pale moonlight, barefoot and draped in white silk, Jimin executed a soaring grand jeté, a massive aerial split that momentarily stopped time. Barefoot dancing is the ultimate, unforgiving lie detector test for a dancer's flexibility because it completely exposes the metatarsals and the plantar fascia. Jimin's feet possess an extreme degree of plantar flexion. When he points his toes in midair, his arch curves so deeply that the instep forms a perfect continuous aerodynamic line with his shin, a physical trait heavily coveted in the brutal world of elite ballet. As he landed from that massive leap, he did not crash heavily onto the stage. He utilized the extreme elasticity in his Achilles tendons and the deep synovial lubrication in his knee joints to absorb the massive kinetic shock instantly, landing with the terrifying, soundless grace of a feline predator. Then came the deeply artistic era of Black Swan, the magnum opus of BTS's contemporary artistry, where Jimin literally transformed into the tragic, ethereal bird. The choreography required extensive scapular retraction, pulling the shoulder blades deeply together to create the breathtaking illusion of dark wings sprouting from the back, paired with agonizingly slow, sweeping arm extensions that pushed the rotator cuffs to their absolute circumference limit.
Jimin moved through this routine not as a pop star executing steps, but as a tortured entity, his spine undulating in continuous fluid waves that started from his deep pelvis and rippled flawlessly out through his fingertips. Where J-Hope dances precisely on the beat with bone-breaking precision, Jimin dances in the heavy space between the beats, using his breathtaking elasticity to stretch a single musical note into an agonizingly beautiful visual eternity. His flexibility allows him to hang in the air for a microsecond longer, to lean backward an inch further, and to sweep closer to the floor than anyone else on stage, making him the ultimate kinetic centerpiece of the entire group. When he transitions into heavy, aggressive hip-hop tracks like Mic Drop or his sultry, globally dominant solo like Crazy, he seamlessly adapts this contemporary flexibility, utilizing deep, intoxicating pelvic isolations and fluid neck rolls that are drenched in deadly, captivating charisma, proving his physical prime is ever evolving. However, this level of supernatural flexibility comes with an immense and often invisible cost. The sheer amount of torque and tension Jimin places on his hypermobile joints means his muscles have to work 10 times harder just to stabilize his fragile skeleton. The countless hours spent in the basement practice rooms stretching his hamstrings until they scream, meticulously conditioning his core to protect his delicate spine, and enduring the chronic, silent aches that constantly plague contemporary dancers, speak to an artistic dedication that borders on pure poetic tragedy. He willingly and repeatedly sacrifices his own physical comfort to provide the world with a fleeting glimpse of absolute, unadulterated aesthetic perfection. Park Jimin does not just execute choreography, he becomes the music itself, his body acting as a pure, hyper-elastic conduit for the deep emotional weight of the song. His placement at number 1 is not merely a mathematical victory of physical angles, but a monumental testament to a performer who has utterly mastered the fragile, dangerous, and incredibly beautiful intersection of anatomical extreme and raw artistic vulnerability. He is the celestial swan of BTS, a true biomechanical anomaly, whose ethereal hypermobility, staggering core strength, and devastating emotional expression rewrite the laws of human motion every single time he steps under the spotlight, leaving global audiences completely breathless, utterly mesmerized, and forever changed by the sheer, liquid physics of his legendary dance.